Hi, everybody, and welcome to another discussion of Unleash Your Potential video series. I am Elizabeth Suarez, your host, as well as a leadership and negotiation strategist who helps organizations improve their workforce while empowering their professionals with the skills and the tools necessary to better manage challenges and opportunities. I encourage you to visit and also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Speaker Elizabeth Suarez, to catch up on prior discussions as well as other video resources. Today, I am excited to have with me Simon Haigh. He is a former attorney as well as a multinational CEO who currently is an entrepreneur who is helping others achieve success from a personal and professional standpoint. Simon, welcome, and thank you for being here with me.
You're very welcome, Elizabeth. It's great to see you. And I know we're separated by a big ocean, but we're very close chatting here today. So it's great to see you.
Great. And thank you for doing this. I know you're in Ireland, beautiful country, and I understand it's sunny today.
It's been sunny every day apart from 2 days since February. So we're making the most of it. It's great.
Wow. I may have to go and move there one of these days. But anyway, thank you for being here. So due to COVID-19, I am focusing my work lately on guiding clients, especially women, to be more relevant and balanced during and after this crisis. There's several studies, Simon, that you and I have been chatting about concerning showing how women are being affected more economically than men. Some experts are attributing this to the fact that women have lower paying jobs or the fact that women may carry a heavier load when it comes to childcare. No matter what it is, I am concerned that this COVID-19 is providing more fuel to the fire when it comes to this wage gap. And I know, Simon, you have spent your entire career very much focused on this gender balance and wage gap. So who better than to join me on this topic, especially that I want to really set a spotlight on this topic. So before we start this conversation, Simon, I want you to share with my audience, what is your main purpose and goal that you're currently doing with your effort of being a growth strategist?
Okay, so thanks for that introduction. That was great. So as you said, my title is growth strategist, and I've been fortunate to have a 26-year career, as you said, across various industries, various C-suite type positions. And that's culminated in the last 6-7 years. I run my own coaching, consulting, advisory, training, facilitation business. And I guess the core of it is helping leaders achieve personal and professional success. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's the growth part of it, is that personal and professional growth success. Because in my view, they are completely intertwined. You know, you can't separate personal and professional. Yeah. So I do that through the prism of 4 key areas: business growth, leadership growth, brand growth, and mindset growth. Oh. So I help increase personal and business confidence by unblocking roadblocks, facilitating potential growth, and transformational change, but amongst leaders and within organizations. I've also been very blessed to have written 2 or 3 books on the subject. I lecture. And so for me, it's all about that inextricable link of the personal, business, leadership, and mindset growth.
And, and that's wonderful. And I think due to that thing that you believe that it's all intertwined, I think that's why you are Absolutely. Such a strong leader and so much needed in our world when it comes to this gender balance as well as wage gap, because I think you do get it. I know you do get it. So with that, I was very interested in an article you co-authored a couple years ago titled Gender Balance and Its Importance in Negotiating Business Deals. I love that the article, you addressed the fact that you said, you need to have a gender balance when you're negotiating. I don't care what deal you're negotiating, because when you get that gender balance, your deal will hold. I mean, for me as a woman, as a professional, and has spent several years like yourself working in corporations as well now as an entrepreneur, those are that is music to my ear. So as a leadership and negotiation strategist myself, what propelled you to write this article?
Okay, that's a great question. There's a couple of factors. There's probably three factors, right? First of all, personally, I live at home with a wife and two daughters. So, I live in a very feminine, nurturing environment. And I'm very passionate about seeing my 20 and 21-year-old daughters do really well in the world. So that's number one. Number two, I think I mentioned before, I wrote a couple of books a couple of years ago about deal closing and deal making. And I noticed when I researched those books that there was very, very little written about the importance of gender balance to help organizations maximize their growth. Okay. And then the third reason was that I was actually approached by a publisher in the UK, a company called Globe Law and Business, a couple of years ago to write an article. They said we would like quite a disruptive article. Okay. And I thought, so I put everything together and I thought, well, hang about gender balance for better business. Is something that's very rarely written about. And then I researched more and I noticed that there's a lot of studies in the military space. Okay, so in the military space where the feminine is involved in brokering deals, invariably those military deals are much more sustainably lasting. Okay, so then I started thinking, well, what about the corporate space? And I found very little. Okay, now Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook, has done a lot of work. So I decided to research and write. And so that was really the basis of it. Also, I guess the fourth reason, there is a fourth reason, is during my career, I've been fortunate to work with a whole load of different executives, male and female. And I've personally witnessed, because I'm very much about justice and ethics, quite a lot of gender imbalance, quite a lot of bias. I've also witnessed discrimination. I remember once I stood up for a female employee in a certain organization, and the senior executives effectively turned on me for doing it. So I've seen it from all those research, business, and personal angles. So that article just came out of all of those factors.
It's a fascinating article, and I encourage people, you can Google the article. It's called Gender Balance and Its Importance in Negotiating Business Deals, because as a male or a female, this is a great article that brings to light a lot of concept. And one of the concepts that brought to light that I had never heard this term before was the second generation gender bias. Can you define it for all of us? And also, how can you manage it in today's COVID-19 world?
Yeah. Okay. So just to go back. So, I mean, traditionally, and I'm talking about the Western world here, the main pillars of society, military, church, politics, and business, have been male or masculine oriented, right? I prefer to talk about masculine and feminine rather than male and female, because we all have masculine and feminine within us, okay? So the pillars of society have been masculine oriented. While I was researching, I then realized that there are certain patterns of behavior that have been traditionally associated with men, right? With the masculine. And they are aggressiveness, hierarchical thinking, outcomes thinking. But while I was researching more and more, and particularly looking at the studies of people like Sheryl Sandberg, I noticed that some of those masculine traits, even though females have masculine traits as well, are looked upon unfavorably in women. But interestingly, not just by men, but also by women. Okay. And this manifests itself in, women often being criticized for being too bossy, for being too, for asking for too much. And as I said, really importantly, it's not just men reinforcing this second generation bias. It has also been women as well. So it's a really, really important subject. And I think that the more women who realize that maybe they're playing their part in this, I think the more likely it will uncover it.
So let's dive in a little bit about that, because I like the fact that, I'm like, that women are actually fueling this little masculine versus feminine aspect that you're mentioning. What are we doing that we need to stop in order to help us be seen? Because I love how you said bossy. I would have used another word that started with a B, because that was how I was always described. Because after you and I have been speaking for a while here, I have realized yes, I have very strong masculine traits because I got to a high level in corporate America. And to
Yeah.
get to that high level, there was no way that I could have done it just by
Yeah.
having feminine traits. So what
Yeah.
are you maybe saying that women need to stop doing or start doing in order to better ourselves in this environment?
So it's very hard to generalize, obviously, but I think, I think all of us, right? What I'm not talking about positive discrimination or diversity. I'm talking about balance, right?
Okay.
So I think the sooner that all of us, men and women, appreciate that having that balance internally, and for organizations to appreciate that having a balance is critically important for our personal outcomes and the organizational outcomes.
Okay.
It's so important, it's self-evident, and yet those biases are for some reason holding us back. It's really interesting that I think it was Sheryl Sandberg's study that when women negotiate on behalf of others,
Yes.
they tend to get similar results to men, but when they negotiate on behalf of themselves, they don't tend to. So I think to more directly answer your question, I think women need to just sort of stand up and say, right, I don't need to become a man to do this, but given that organizations need to be gender balanced, I need to say what I need to say. Just say it. Just ask for it.
Okay.
And if you don't ask, you don't get. So I think it's about being direct and confident.
And I'm glad you brought up the word negotiation, because I can share with you that as a leadership and negotiation strategist, even pre-COVID-19, Simon, I always got that feeling of apprehension from clients, especially women, saying, oh, that word. Like all of a sudden, negotiation was viewed as this thing that is like, oh, I know it's good for me, but I really do not want to engage in it. And this was pre-COVID-19.
Yeah.
Now that COVID-19 has happened, we are in this for the past couple of months. I feel the negotiation now is even further away than the back burner. And as a strategist in the field, I'm sitting here doing, wait a second, people, we have to stop. We need to figure out, how do we have to negotiate now? So what are your feelings about this? Do you think the negotiation is becoming more of a burden to professionals? And if so, why?
Okay, so there's quite a lot of things in that. So the first thing to say is that, of course, given that we're going through this global pandemic, the first time that the whole of humankind won't forget what we're going through, there is a state of shock. There is a state of stasis right across the system, okay? Which means that things like negotiation and sales are slowing, right? They're currently slowing. But it's really interesting. I refer to what are called the three-legged stool of business, right? All business is governed by the three R's: risk, revenue, and reputation. Risk, reputation, and revenue. Okay. So and the same with us personally for our brands. So right now, all businesses are really they're really prioritizing the risk and the reputation, right? Okay, because they're realizing that revenue is hard to come by. But business will continue, okay? So revenue will always be there. So once the initial shock of this comes through, I think negotiation and sales will be turned to much more strongly again. The other thing to say is that, the World Economic Forum lists negotiation and closing skills. It meets every year in Davos in January as one of the top 10 core corporate skills, okay? So negotiation skills are never going to go away. I just think corporates are in the state of shock. And I guess the third thing to say then is that, I think there's a real opportunity, okay? So the old school, pushy, hard sales approach of the 80s and 90s, those days are over. And I think we're now moving into much more relationship-based negotiation and sales, much more value-add stuff. And ironically, that feeds more into the feminine traits. So in summary, I think once we come through this state of shock, I think the environment will be much more propitious for the feminine, much more open for the feminine negotiators to succeed even better. So I'm just an optimist, but I do think so.
You're giving me hope. I'm happy for that. I'm happy to hear that. But I want to take back the three R's, bring that back, what you mentioned, the risk, revenue, and reputation. The risk, reputation, and revenue.
Yeah.
I believe that is not only for corporate, but also, like you said, also from a personal perspective.
Absolutely.
So I have seen a couple of professionals that are, that they say it. They're like, I am grateful and I'm lucky that I'm still employed. But you know what? All along, I have noticed that I am undervalued, that I am undercompensated. And even ever since COVID-19 started, all of a sudden my skills are highly needed and I'm working even harder now and I still have no compensation, but I am afraid to open my mouth because I am the lucky one that I'm employed. And I'm sitting here as a coach, and this is actually a real client of mine. And I'm sitting there looking at this person saying, I'm sorry, you are valuable. You have a reputation that this is why the company has you, it still keeps you on your, being their part of their employees. So I believe that your revenue as an individual needs to increase because your responsibility, another R that's not part of the 3 R's you mentioned, your responsibility level has increased substantially. I mean, it has more than tripled, Simon. And this professional is hesitant. So what advice would you give to this professional? Should the professional say, you know what, enough. I haven't even gotten a raise in more than a year. They haven't even gotten a raise in more than a year. I deserve it. The company is in the black. They're not having, because the company is in a needed industry. I will keep, remain anonymous about who the industry is. So all of a sudden, this person is hesitating, and all the opposite. I'm like, you need to go and ask for it. So what would you advise this client of mine?
So again, so this very much depends on the situation. But I think overall, I think there needs to be a common sense approach right now. Okay. First thing to say is if you are excelling, then yes, you should be paid what you're worth. Okay. But bear in mind that often, and I'm not going to name names, C-suite executives in organizations don't see that, or they are panicking about much bigger issues about survival of the business, etc. So I think to answer the question, I think having a combination of really good self and situational awareness is critically important. So if you are a good employee and you're working hard, then really have a look at your own self-awareness. Examine your thoughts, examine your emotions, examine your feelings and your behaviors, right? And if you really believe that you should be getting paid more, then put it all together and make a bid for it, okay? The other side then is situational awareness. You need to comprehend what's going on about you. So if you think that there is no chance of anybody in the organization getting a pay rise while the company is in shock, then maybe you have to bide your time. So I think that really answers the question is you've got to have that common sense, self and situational awareness attitude. The other thing, just to quickly say, is that I think we're going to be, Gartner, I think, talks about, we're going to be moving from 30% remote work to about 50% as a result of this crisis. And I think, I hope that good organizations will use this as an opportunity to start filtering out some of the biases we've mentioned before and maybe start rewarding some of the better performing employees, regardless of masculinity or femininity. That's what I hope comes out of this. Let's see. Again, I'm an optimist.
Yeah, and you're an optimist. So one of the last things I want to conclude with this discussion is the fact of the wage gap. And especially that you have worked in the C-suite across the world. That's what fascinated me about asking you to be part of this discussion, is the fact that you have not worked in the United States, but you have worked in Ireland, you have worked in Africa, you have worked in Australia. I mean, you have this global view and perspective when it comes to this wage gap. So what are your thoughts about it? Let's start with, what are your thoughts about it and what needs to happen in order to start diminishing the gap?
I do think that, I think organizations really need to, I think there's probably 5 or 6 things. They really need to develop suitable policies from recruitment right the way through the whole HR process. I think the second thing is, I think then there really needs to be less lip service and much better internal mentoring programs. Okay. We're not talking just male, female, we're talking all employees. So aspiring leaders really do need to be matched with really effective, influential mentors within organizations. I also think education within organizations needs to be much better improved around the whole bias thing. I think there needs to be much better learning and move away from training towards more learning environments. I think negotiation and deal-making programs, and this is great for you and I as trainers in negotiation deal-making, I think these should be much stronger disciplines within organizations. At the end of the day, there's been studies that have said that one of the last jobs to be replaced by robots is sales, because sales and negotiation requires empathy. It requires communication. It requires that social context. So, and I think finally then, I think organizations do need to self-audit to make sure there's much more of a level balance field. So there's a whole load of things.
Yeah. No, and I like that. And I like the fact that you're looking at it from an organizational perspective. And I know that Absolutely. You and I work with organizations, and that's why we look at it very much from an organizational perspective. So what I would like to do is now leave a couple of tips with our audience of, even if they are in an organization and they realize that the organization is not offering all this, because I like your concept of learning rather than just training. Also the mentoring. What are one or two things, tips, advice that you will give professionals right now that are watching this and saying, you know, even if your organization is not offering this, what should you be considering in order not only for you to go up the ladder, but also masculine or feminine or whoever you are, also diminish this wage gap, because it's going to help all of us. This is not just a woman's issue. This is a man issue. This is a world issue. This is our community issue. One or two tips, what would you want to advise people to consider?
Okay, so I would advise there's probably three, okay? Very quickly, three. Okay. I would target these at employees as well as employers. So number one, practice or put in place a process or programs around what I call negotiation mindfulness. Okay, so be more mindful about how you communicate. So I'm talking about the organization, but also employees. How do you communicate? Are you really listening? Are you really leveraging networking? How are you influencing? Are you doing that sufficiently well? So it's all about awareness around what I call negotiation mindfulness. The second thing is, use every opportunity you can to test what I call the deal zone. Every day, subconsciously, without even knowing it, we're negotiating. We're negotiating at home, we're negotiating at work, we're negotiating in the traffic. So always be thinking about, what's my opening position, what's my closing position, what's my likely position. Kind of test that negotiation muscle. And I guess the third thing is a bit of a plug for you and I, is that learning negotiation skills and deal-making skills underpins all this. So you have great programs and I have programs as well. And hopefully we can do a little bit more together in this whole gender balance for better business, because gender balanced business is better business.
And that's why I like working with you. And this is why I invited you, because you get to the point and you actually are making us aware of all the situation and that we have control. That's what I really like. So thank you, Simon, for your insights and valuable tips. They have been amazing. I also want to thank all of you that are watching. And now I would like to hear from all of you. Do you have any tips on how you can ask for better compensation, or how you can improve your current situation at work, even during this COVID-19 life? So comment below and let's get the conversation started. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And Simon, I will see you soon.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.